All right, let's dive into one of the most influential and, yeah, pretty controversial personal finance books of all time, Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And it all kicks off with a simple but really powerful story.
So right from the get-go, the whole book is built around this major conflict, this choice. As a kid, the author, Robert Kiyosaki, got completely opposite advice from his two father figures. See, he had his own dad, who he calls his poor dad. This guy was super smart, highly educated, but always said the love of money is the root of all evil. But then, there was his rich dad, his best friend's father, and he had a totally different take. The lack of money is the root of all evil.
So you can see the dilemma, right? As a kid, Kiyosaki had this huge choice to make. Was he going to listen to his poor dad, the brilliant guy who always seemed to be struggling with money? Or was he going to listen to his rich dad, the guy who didn't even finish 8th grade but was literally building an empire? And man, their advice was just worlds apart. I mean, look at this. Poor dad's advice was all about playing it safe, the traditional route, right? How to be a really good employee. But rich dad? Completely different playbook. His advice was all about ownership, being in control, and honestly, just having a totally different relationship with money and risk.
So this all brings us to the very first huge lesson Kiyosaki learned. It all started when he finally went up to his rich dad and asked, can you teach me how to make money? And rich dad's answer wasn't some boring lecture. Nope, it was time for a real-world lesson.
So what does he do? Rich dad gives Kiyosaki and his buddy Mike a job in one of his stores. Their task? Dust and can goods. Their pay? A whopping 10 cents an hour. So for weeks, these kids are working their tails off for basically nothing, and they're getting more and more ticked off, until they're finally ready to just quit. And guess what? That was the whole point. So when Kiyosaki finally storms in and complains, that's when Rich Dad drops his first and probably most important lesson. He basically told them, look, the fact that you're angry about working for pennies, that means you're finally ready to learn something. Because real financial smarts, according to him, only begin when you stop being a slave to that paycheck. And what he wanted them to avoid was this thing he called the rat race. You know what I'm talking about, right? It's that classic pattern. You get up, you go to work, you pay your bills. Your whole life is run by two emotions: fear, the fear of not having enough money, and then greed, or desire, once you get paid. And here's the kicker. Getting a raise doesn't actually help. Nope. You just spend more, your lifestyle gets bigger, and the trap just gets tighter. And look, this chart shows you exactly how that trap works. For most folks, the salary comes in, and then whoosh, it goes right back out the door to pay for taxes, the mortgage, car payments, all that stuff. At the end of the day, there's nothing left over to actually build any real wealth. Okay, so if that's the trap, how in the world do you escape it? Well, according to Rich Dad, it all boils down to one simple but really powerful secret. It's something the rich get that most people just don't. He would pose this one central question, a question that he believed was literally the key to unlocking all of it. And here's the answer. This is like the foundation of the whole book. It's not about how much you make, not at all. It's about what you do with the money you have. He was convinced that most people struggle with money simply because they don't get this one single rule. And he made the definitions so simple. Forget all the confusing accounting jargon. An asset, it's just something that puts money in your pocket. That's it. It makes you money, even when you're not actively working. And a liability? You guessed it. It's the exact opposite. It's anything that takes money out of your pocket. Simple as that. So if you look at how this works, an asset, well, it sits over here in your asset column and it pumps cash into your income. It basically becomes a little money-making engine for you. Now compare that to a liability. That just sits over here in the liabilities column, and all it does is create more expenses. It's just a constant drain on your cash. Okay, so this brings us to probably the most famous and most controversial idea in the whole book. Is your house an asset? Now, most of us were taught, just like Poor Dad, that our home is our biggest asset. But Rich Dad, he said, no way. My house is a liability. Why? Because every single month it takes money out of your pocket for the mortgage, for taxes, for repairs. So, based on his definition, it's a liability. So this whole asset thing leads right into the next big lesson. Okay, cool, you're supposed to buy assets, but what does that actually mean? What are you supposed to do? Well, Rich Dad made this really important distinction. He said there's a huge difference between your profession and your business. See, your profession, that's your job. It's what you do to earn a salary and pay the bills. But your business, that's your asset column. So when he says mind your own business, he literally means focus on building up that asset column.
And there's this amazing story in the book that just nails this point. The founder of McDonald's, Ray Kroc, was talking to some MBA students, and he tells them, I'm not in the hamburger business. His profession, yeah, was selling burgers, but his business was real estate. He was buying up all the valuable land that the restaurants were built on. That was the real moneymaker.
So what's your business then? Well, it's your portfolio of things that put money in your pocket. Things like real estate, stocks, bonds, maybe even intellectual property. This is the stuff Rich Dad said you should be focused on buying.
All right, so let's tie all of this together. The bottom line is really this. All these lessons are really asking one big question. What are you building? Are you just building a long career, or are you building a strong asset column?
In this way of thinking, it totally redefines what wealth even is. It's not about your net worth, not some big number on a piece of paper. Real wealth is about time. It's how much cash flow your assets are generating compared to your expenses. Or, to put it another way, if you quit your job today, how long could you live off the money your assets are making? That's your wealth.
And this right here, this pretty much sums up the entire philosophy of the book. The rich, they buy assets. The poor tend to only have expenses. And the middle class, well, this is the trap. They buy liabilities that they think are assets. You know, that brand new car, the bigger house. The goal is to get out of that cycle and start acting like the rich, using your income to buy things that make you more income.
So that really leaves us all with one final, pretty powerful question to ask ourselves. Are your financial efforts, your focus, just on getting a bigger paycheck, just on that income statement? Or are you really focused on building that asset column, the column that could one day actually set you free? It's a huge shift in thinking, right? And it's exactly that shift that has challenged millions of readers to completely rethink everything they were ever taught about money.